Hello and welcome to the part 2 of the discussion. Earlier, we had seen the historical background and the evolution of the global trade wars. We had also spoken in a very minimal fashion what this global trade war is. But then right now, we have to do a thorough analysis of what this global trade war is. And to discuss that, with us, we have Mr. Arun Krishnan, a beloved friend and a political observer. So he is going to explain to us certain very key questions that I'll be posing to him. So Arun, what is the real deal? I mean, we have been hearing this for like a lot of time, the global trade war, the US-China rivalry. Basically, what is the real deal? I mean, I want to ask you what exactly is happening. Can you explain to me the magnitude of the issue and why is this happening, or how is this happening, or how long will this be happening? Basically, I'm asking you to do is a Socratic analysis of this very problem. Over to you, sir.
Okay. So the trade war issue that we are facing is right now, it's been characterized as being unprecedented in its scale. So it's been rightly called the largest trade war in the economic history of the world. So if you ask me, is it the largest trade war in the economic history? I think we need to seriously look into it and analyze it to understand if it is actually such a massive in its scale. So first of all, we have to look at what essentially is a trade war. So a trade war is basically, it's a protectionist sort of measure where a country favors their own domestic industry, or a country basically imposes certain tariffs, tariffs, quotas, or something like dumping duties, anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties. So these sort of basically taxes are imposed on imports from foreign nations so that they can give a favorable economic environment for the domestic industry. So in this particular case, why we are calling it a trade war is because the US is the world's largest importer of steel. Okay. So what's happening is that the US currently faces a huge trade deficit with China. So currently the deficit is standing at around $375 billion. 375 billion US dollars. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it is even bigger than much of GDP of certain countries, right?
Definitely, because you are talking about two of the biggest economies in the world, and China is currently the world's biggest economy, followed by the EU, and then you have the US, right? So what's happening right now is that the US, especially Donald Trump, feels that the US economy has been hard done by the Chinese, because especially the Chinese have been very hard in the treatment of the US investors, the treatment of US companies, because if you are a US manufacturer who is going to set up operations in China, the condition is that you have to have a joint venture there in China, and also you have to hand over the technology to China.
Oh, that seems like a very blatant violation of the IPR policies and trade secrets, isn't it?
It definitely is, but the issue is that China is very reluctant, very insistent on it. So because China needs the IPR to grow, and that's what the US is currently strong on, because China has basically caught up with the US on most other terms, but it's where the IP is where US is strong. So China needs the US IP for its own growth, which they are, in a way, they are forcefully taking it. So that is one of the major issues that the US particularly has with China. So why we are calling it a trade war right now is because the US has been implementing tariffs on aluminum and steel. On steel, they have been imposing a quota of 25% tariff, and on aluminum, they have been imposing a tariff of 10%.
That's huge, right?
Yeah, that's pretty huge. So I'll just explain because since most of our viewers will be writing prelims, and you can expect questions based on the differences between the tariffs, quotas, dumping duties, and countervailing tax, that sort of things. So a tariff is basically, it's a tax on import, right? And a quota is a quantitative limit, that you're saying that you can import only this much limit.
Let's say 100 kgs of aluminum.
Yeah, exactly. So you're basically fixing the limit.
Correct.
Right, and then we have something called anti-dumping duty. So dumping is a process where a country, if they have a comparative advantage, that is, if in China it's cheaper to manufacture an electric toy which costs $5 in the US to manufacture. In China, if it can be manufactured in $1, the Chinese are offering tax concessions for them to export it in huge quantities to the US. What happens is that the US manufacturer will not be able to keep up because the cost is very low, and Chinese products will be flooding the market.
That means they are going to demolish the domestic market.
So that's dumping. So to counter that, we have WTO as a mechanism where you can institute an anti-dumping duty, right? And countervailing duty is, for instance, if a country is giving a trade distorting subsidy. For instance, they are giving normally across the world, a product will have a certain amount of manufacturing cost. So what happens is this particular country is giving a lot of subsidies, which makes the production cost come down much below the world average. So that is giving them an unfair advantage, because the products they become more competitive for exports, and they can essentially the same effect of crowding out the domestic manufacturer.
This is something probably I should add a point here, which is the idea of the WTO debate is really centric on this fundamental idea of subsidies. Probably we should do a separate video on that thing. It's so elaborate, the green box, the yellow box, the amber box, and agreements on agriculture, AOA, yeah. Right? And the Bali conference, how India has been really stalling it, and it's a huge thing, and it has got repercussion with Indian domestic policy of the Food Security Act, the FSA Act. So it's going to be a very huge topic, but then what Arun says, I can completely relate to it, considering the subsidy is the important thing, and that is how you counter the subsidies, unfair subsidies, the price distorting subsidies, by imposing a countervailing duty.
Yeah.
So basically, right. how is this countervailing duty and anti-dumping duty? It all both looks very similar, but how do you distinguish it?
Basically, they are WTO provisions.
Okay.
So it's the technical difference comes mainly in what element of it is actually giving them the unfair advantage.
Okay.
So a product, if the government is giving them a policy where they can bring it, if the production cost is cheaper, and then bringing it because the product is very cheap compared to domestic market, then we can say it's an anti-dumping duty, because it's cheaper there. You're dumping a lot of cheap goods from there here, right? But if the government is deliberately giving trade distorting subsidies to lower the manufacturing cost, then you can say that because it's a direct effect of the subsidy given by the government, then it's a countervailing.
Hence for the name, like countervailing duty, unveiling, right?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay, yeah.
So so coming back to the point, so what we are seeing right now is that US has been trying to strong arm China into submission, because for a while now China has been taking on the US as the economic hegemon of the world, and China has been succeeding to a large extent in that. So you can see that even the issue starting ever since China joined the WTO in 2001. And around 2007, China had a GDP which was only around some 3.7 billion or something. And right now, in 2017, China has managed to triple the size of the GDP, and it's currently is able to be the world's #1 economic power, right? So the US is viewing that with a lot of suspicion. The US is not very comfortable with it, and you can also see that a lot of geopolitical issues between the US across the world. If you particularly see in the South China Sea, right. We have the no-fly zone which was imposed, the Senkaku Island issue. So we have seen a lot of skirmishes between the US and China happening globally. So we have to connect all these and see what's happening. So Trump is not basically simply trying to reduce the trade deficit. Trump is actually trying to use tariffs as a tool for geopolitical posturing. Tariffs as a tool to try and bring China into submission. But the issue that we have to see right here is that US exports into China are a huge volume of exports, right? US mainly exports aircrafts, US exports soybeans, and US exports automobiles. Soybeans particularly important because soybeans are mainly given as pig feed in China. And China pork is one of the staple diets of the Chinese. So in that way, China is also hugely dependent on imports from the US for soybeans, right? And in return, most of the imports from China into the US are electronics, clothing, and manufactured goods, right? And so the trade deficit right now is in favor of China. So like I mentioned, it's around $375 billion. And Trump's policy is that Trump has a set of agendas. Trump is telling the Chinese that, see, you guys need to do a couple of things. First of all, you need to stop giving subsidies to the tech companies. You need to stop stealing our IP, intellectual property. You need to bring down the trade deficit. You need to open up your country for more investment from the US. So these are the conditions that Trump is currently trying to bring China into submission using the tariffs. But the issue is that it's more likely that it's highly unlikely that China will relent on the issue of tech subsidies, because China has a plan called Made in China 2025.
Yes.
And also China has a plan to be the world leader in artificial intelligence by 2030. So China, and also if you see Made in China 2025, the idea is that China is themselves trying to bring down their reliance on exports, because if you see, like I said, from 2007 to 2017, China has become the world's largest economy. And how have they achieved it is because China has been relying on what you call low-cost manufacturing.
So basically, it's an export-led growth.
Export-led growth, entirely export-led growth. Okay. So if I have to explain it a bit more, what like Adam Smith told in The Wealth of Nations, that countries should not rely on try and produce everything internally. They should outsource whatever the production they can to countries where it's cheaper. So that's where the notion of comparative advantage comes.
Yeah, David Ricardo also, I think.
Yeah, same. So the idea here is that China, it was the labor cost was the cheapest because the standard of living is the cheapest. You have to pay the lowest wages there. So essentially, it's cheaper to produce a good in China than anywhere else in the world.
Yes.
So what did Adam Smith say? He said that you should outsource it to wherever it's cheaper, because the comparative advantage, it's cheaper to produce it in their country than it's to produce internally. So it makes perfect sense for you to outsource it and get it done there, and also you focus on what you're good at.
True.
Right. So that's what exactly the US economy has been doing. So the Chinese has been dependent on exports so far, but how is it now? China realizes that the issue with that is, if the relations between US, who is one of the biggest exporters, so if the relations soar between them, then they cannot rely on this market as much as they have been relying on so far.
True.
Right. So that's why they have been trying to shift towards a different growth strategy. Right.
I want to interject, and so basically, I think you are trying to say that it is not Trump gone crazy kind of thing, but it's something very natural for
it's definitely not Trump gone crazy. But if you ask me, I think this sort of an economic policy should have followed a thorough analysis, which I don't think has been completely done.
Okay.
Right. Why I'm saying is because if you examine the result of this sort of tariffs on the US economy, it's actually going to hurt the US economy themselves a lot more.
Okay.
Because the very idea was that the iron and steel industry, it's employing around 6.5 million workers, or 1.5 million workers in the US. So the idea was that we should have we should stop dependence on the imports from cheap imports from China and other countries, and also give a boost to the domestic industry.
Okay.
But the issue is that there are around 6.5 million people working in industries which are reliant on cheap imports from China and other countries. Okay. Right. So these inputs are coming as inputs to a lot of other industries like the aviation industry, and in this particular case, because normally it's the Congress which has the right to say if a tariff should be imposed. But in this particular case, how it was done is there's a clause which says that the president can give a tariff in case there's an issue of national security. So what Trump is saying right now is that because we are dependent on imports of iron and steel from China, we have a dependence on them for manufacturing weapons and aircraft. So that's a pretext on which he is giving this sort of tariff. But the issue is it's going to affect them in the long term. Why? Because essentially all people, be they Americans, be they Indians, what do the end consumer want? The end consumer wants to buy the product at the cheapest rate.
True.
So in effect, if you are trying to boost your domestic industry by cutting out by protectionist measures, by cutting out imports from other countries, essentially in the long term, the product in your country, the quality will decline because there's no competition.
Correct.
And also what's going to happen is that your products, the prices of your products will go up because there's no competition. You can decide how much price you want to sell it.
True. True.
Right. So what happens? The end consumer will be impacted.
Very inefficient economic system.
Definitely.
What Schumpeter spoke about, the creative destruction doesn't happen here.
Definitely.
Right.
There's no incentive for innovation. Exactly what you're saying. So in the long run, it can be very much it will turn bad for the US. But also, if you see the sort of retaliatory measures that are being taken, there's an interesting angle to it, because China has been imposing retaliatory tariffs on imports from the US also. So they have been focusing on the makers of bourbon, makers of soybean, or makers of pork growers. Okay. So if you notice that these are the constituencies, these industries come in the constituencies which are Trump supporting constituencies. They are the Republican constituencies. Okay. So basically they are following a retaliatory approach whereby they are targeting Trump support base specifically. And that is particularly important because they have the midterm elections coming up. So I think, so in a way it's more, the economics is actually spilling over to the politics, and it's all interconnected.
So that's what, this is one question probably I really want to think about. I mean, the issue is mostly about globalization itself. Like, when in 90s, when the whole thing was taking off, and we saw the Indian economy opening up, and the ASEAN had already made a big impact. We spoke about China's rise. You saw the rise of BRICS and many things like that. But of late, we have seen that there is some kind of hurdles that the globalization is facing. Like, be it Theresa May, or in a Brexit, as we can see in the European context, the European Union is being a bit shaky about it. We also spoke about how Greece was reacting to all of it. We spoke about, there is news about Cyrus and Cyprus and Syriza, all these people, how the Greece election was been won, and we can see some traits of this in Spain and Portugal also, this kind of anti-globalization moves there. And we saw the breakdown of TPP, and the moment Trump came out, came victorious, the first thing probably he did do was to scrap this TPP deal, and it was a very, so are we actually seeing an anti-globalization move in the world? Are we going to more regionalization? Are we seeing a resurgence of a Keynesian economics back into the track?
I wouldn't completely agree with it, because there have been such trends. If you see the rise of Trump, the rise of the far right across Europe, so this sort of political trend we are seeing, and what is common to all of them is that this is sort of xenophobia. This is sort of fear that the outsider is taking our job.
Right.
This is sort of fear that our people are not getting the benefits of our economic boom. Outsiders are coming in and taking our jobs. Our jobs are getting outsourced. So that's a sort of idea that is behind this sort of thinking. But the issue is that it's not good for their economy in the long term to be actually going into an isolation sort of policy. So I would definitely say that it's not going anti-globalization. So I was to give you an example of what's happening. For instance, with the TPP, Trump has withdrawn from the TPP. But if you see that the rest of the players in the TPP, they have actually gone ahead with the TPP. And also China, we are seeing, what we are actually seeing is not a downturn of globalization. We are seeing that a shift from multilateral sort of trade system to a system which is based on regional trade groupings.
So, this, like, right now when I think about it, I can see like 3-4 groups. Like, one, you have a global trade with respect to this, let's say WTO, and then side by side you have European Union, ASEAN, TPP, TIPP, APEC, RCEP, and many things like that. Now you also have a very, on the bottom side you have the very country specific nationalist, these kind of things. So you're saying that it's not WTO, neither is it national. You're saying that this kind of the middle path is what people are choosing. Is it? Are you trying to say that?
Yeah, that's the recent trend we are seeing is that of regional trade blocks. Right. If you see, India has been active in the BRICS, and we can see that China has been championing what is called the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership,
right,
which is in direct opposition to the TPP, which was at the time led by Obama and the US. Right. But the larger point that we have to stress upon here is that what we are seeing is an erosion of faith in the multilateral trade system,
right,
which was being championed by the WTO. The WTO came into existence, the idea was to establish a rules-based global trade order where countries can sit across as equals and negotiate trade deals and ensure that these deals are adhered to, right, because through sound principles, and also to establish a dispute resolution mechanism where in case there are trade disputes arise, they don't have to spill over into conflicts, they can be resolved at the negotiating table itself.
Right. So now the $1 billion question. Who is winning this trade war? Is it the US or is it the Chinese?
Right now you can say that right now I think it's the Chinese will eventually be winning it. Right now it's not very clear who is winning it, because both of them are standing to lose a lot, but in the short term Trump is putting a lot of sanctions on the Chinese, and the Chinese industry will be heavily hit. That's true, because Trump is progressively moving towards imposing tariffs on 100% of all Chinese imports. So, but the issue is that even if Trump thinks that he can impose tariffs and cut down the deficit, the idea is that it's China actually as a country, policy-wise there's not much they can do, because the huge part of the deficit is actually because of the demand for low-cost electronics from China. This is sort of same issue that India is also facing, because as long as people purchase low-cost devices which are manufactured in China, you can't compete with China on costs.
Correct.
Right. So in that aspect, I think it's not going to be a huge.
So basically, you can't say who is a winner as of now, isn't it?
this idea itself is flawed.
Idea is
There's
flawed.
not going to be a winner in this.
Both of them are going to
Both of them going to lose.
Okay.
And I think I've also read that there will be the emerging markets might get benefited from it.
Or maybe India should keep its fingers crossed when it comes.
It's actually an opportunity.
For India.
We'll come to it.
Okay, yeah. So then another thing, how do we place the other power centers here? I mean, from 90s we saw from a bipolar world we became a unipolar world, but now we also have other power centers in the world, right? Like for the multipolar world, as we put it, we see the rise of UU, we see the rise of South Africa, Brazil, we see the rise of Indians, and we are also contributed much to the rise of this kind of multipolar world. How does these poles, these multiple poles in the world react to this thing? How was European Union? Because I'm pretty sure that EU had a problem with US as well, and
Yeah.
but I'm just asking you, how was EU fixing into all of this, and the equations in the world, how are they changing?
So from the specific context that we're talking about right now, US has been imposing tariffs on a lot of countries, and including countries who are their allies. So if you see that there are almost nine countries have gone to the WTO complaining against the sanctions imposed by the US, and among them there are allies like Canada and India.
Canada?
Yeah, Canada and India. Canada is the largest trade partner of the US, and Canada they have imposed
most trusted ally as well.
Yeah,
isn't
they
it?
have imposed tariffs on Canada as well. So the idea is that it's Trump is actually using tariffs to drive his political agenda, to drive his to emerge as a strong man on the geopolitical front, to tell his supporters that, see, the US have, if you listen to his campaign speeches, he's been saying how much the other developing countries have been ripping off the US. So it was all about making America great again, right?
Right.
And great again, he meant that America is a powerful country who can stand up, who can say that, no, you can't take our money, we are really strong, we can develop our own sort of, our own self-reliance. Right, so that's a sort of thing that's happening right now. But how are the countries reacting to it is that US also has been realizing that they can't keep everyone at bay like this. So it's more like a give and take sort of thing. So if the EU for example, when the US is imposing tariffs on the EU has been actually negotiating with Mexico. They are about to sign a free trade agreement with Mexico, and the EU has actually signed the world's largest bilateral agreement with Japan. It's worth $152 billion. It's the world's largest bilateral agreement.
Okay.
And so the US has, after that, the US has been negotiating with the EU to increase their imports of LNG and soybean. Basically, soybean is the issue, fundamental issue, right? So LNG, why? Because LNG is mostly they're getting from Russia, and the US is trying for them to take more of LNG from the US. But I don't think it's practically gonna work. Why?
I mean, interestingly, I'm just wondering, the whole equations, how this play out, because US has been trying to keep Iran at bay, US has been trying to keep Russia at bay, and US has also been trying to prevent any coalition between coming together of EU and China. Right, and now probably is going to push EU. Like, for example, you remember, we all remember reading about this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and how US has been opposed to this move, but you also see a lot of European countries actually even coming and joining hands with China. But a move like this could probably push the European Union and the European countries into the fold of China, who will be happily he'll take it, right?
Yeah, that looks to be a possibility, but I don't think it's something that we should be really worried about
right now.
Why? Because the EU themselves have their reservations about joining with China. Because we all have reservations about China, right? They are undemocratic. It's a single party state. How far can you trust China? Because if you see that China has basically been flouting all the rules of the global economic order. They are one of the biggest reasons why there's a lack of faith in global multilateralism today.
Correct.
If you look at the South China Sea dispute, the international court had actually ruled against them. But they're still involved there. And to an extent that the countries in the littoral of that region, they're actually supporting China to an extent.
Nobody's able to do anything about the South China Sea issues, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we, the Indians, the Japanese, the Australians, Americans, everybody have been trying, the Paracel Island, the Spratly Islands, what are the 9-dash lines, 11-dash lines, right? I mean, I couldn't agree more with you on that, right? So
so the point is that everyone has a very cautious approach towards China, and China is themselves throwing a lot of weight, economic weight across the world. They have investments, the string of pearls, the Belt and Road Initiative, how they have been throwing a lot of money all over the place, right, and setting up the institutions as financial institutions like the AIB and NDB as an opposition to the Bretton Woods institutions.
True.
So in that aspect, I think everyone is cautious, and China themselves, they are trying to create an alternative world order.
Right. Now the $1 billion question. What's there for it in India? I mean, for India, how should we be seeing as a sovereign country, how should we be seeing at this whole rift between US and China and this global trade war?
So for India, it's in the short term, it can precipitate a small crisis, but in the long term, we have more of an opportunity than a crisis in here.
Okay.
So to start off with, I'd say that look at the global scenario. Essentially, when there's a trade war happening between the US and China, you're talking about 4% of global trade being taxed additionally, right?
Okay.
So that's gonna bring down the global recovery, global growth a bit. So, but the issue is that the Indian economy has, even though the Indian economy is open to a lot of external shocks, so that could affect us also, because what's happening is the global demand supply is going to be affected. If there will be a cost of a lot of items in the global market is going to go up because the supply is less, right? So those items will be costlier in India also. So some of our industries will also be affected because they have higher input costs. And from a perspective of an opportunity, why I'm saying it's an opportunity is because when you have huge import tariffs being put on countries on EU or on China, what happens is Indian exports can have an opportunity to be more competitive. They have an opportunity because being an ally with the US right now, we have the opportunity to fill that gap, provided we can come up with quality materials.
Correct.
So that is an important opportunity for our own Make in India program.
Is it the same thing what the economic survey has been speaking about, something called global headwinds, which is really destabilizing the Indian economy? Are you referring to that same thing?
Yeah, our economy has been very much susceptible to the external global shocks, but the survey last year, it basically talks about how the Indian economy has been undergoing a decoupling effect.
Effect, yeah.
Because for the first part, post financial crisis, when the global economy was down, India was on a higher growth trajectory, and post that, when the global right now what we are seeing is the global economy is growing synchronously, but we are not. Maybe
that's a point that all the aspirants should really take away from this particular discussion. Maybe you can go back to the economic survey of last year, and this decoupling effect is a very interesting thing to be observed, right? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So as far as the Indian economy is concerned, in the short term, we can see this affecting the rupee depreciation.
Yeah.
So right now, rupee is going on a downward spiral, and this can be further precipitated by this. In addition to that, the investor confidence will also be affected.
Investor confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the bigger issue is that the global supply chains will be affected, because right now the global system works on a system of trust and faith. It's that tomorrow, if I am setting up my operations in India or in China, say, I'm banking on the low cost manufacturing, the comparative advantage I can get from there. But tomorrow I am not confident if an issue within these two countries will actually cause me to shut up my business.
True.
Right. So these supply chains will be affected. So what can happen is a reverse of globalization can happen, but it's not sustainable in the long run, because the corporations themselves might lobby the government and put pressure on them to change it.
Yes, sir. So any closing remarks and or any words of optimism to keep the world going?
As a closing remark, I would say that what we are seeing is a tendency for countries to go back to an age where the ideas of mercantilism was there.
Okay.
Where countries thought that it's better to be self-reliant than to rely on other countries.
Beggar thy neighbor.
Yeah. So but that is not sustainable in the long run.
Okay.
And that we should actually, more than closing up our gates, globalization made the world a global village. So it's the right time to be more open about our neighbors, more open about the whole world, and see that we are not much different. And then in that aspect, if you can imbibe that spirit and carry it onwards to an economic system, I think we as the globe, the whole globe, has a more scope to grow together than to try and close our doors and stay inside.
Maybe like I can close it with Tagorean thoughts of where the world has not been broken up into pieces by narrow domestic walls. Okay, thank you, Arun, for that. Maybe I'll leave you with a couple of questions, maybe from a mains perspective. The first question could be from the GS3 perspective. How do you evaluate protectionism as an instrument of economic policy? Substantiate your answers with examples. What are the effects of protectionism in Indian economy? How can these risks be mitigated? And from a GS1 perspective also, maybe I can ask you this question. World War II destroyed certain conventional powers, but it also created new powers who fought on two ends of the economic spectrum. Thank you for listening to us. Have a nice day.